Jean, I really want to thank you for being willing to be in conversation about social justice, how our faith might lead us to social action in the world. And I know you've been very involved in many aspects, so I wonder if you can just let folks know to begin with the kind of things you've been involved in.
So with the church, it's likely what pulled me to be with the church is because there were other people interested in things I was interested in. Outreach has been my home, and in outreach I think of initially a lot of interactions with First United. We took on the women's shelter. We've been involved with refugee sponsorship, and more recently quite active with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And my most recent piece that I'm quite passionate about is efforts to look at climate change and bringing in the people from Drawdown who are supported by the Pachamama Alliance. So those are all the pieces, I think.
I bet there's one or two more, but they may come up in our conversation. So I am wondering how some of that work has changed in this time of sheltering in place and in this time of having to go to meetings, make connections, even do the work through computer, through virtual ways. So I'm interested in sort of what you find have been the celebrations of working virtually and what have been the cautions or the hardships of having to use the internet.
I think the celebration for me has certainly been the opportunity to focus, to take away all the extra bits and pieces that come up in life and actually focus into that possibility of work that we do personally around social responsibility. A lot of it is, for me, is learning, exposure. The last piece that I mentioned with Drawdown and their affiliation with the Pachamama Alliance has been the most amazing and exciting for me in this time because they offer courses, no charge, by donation only, and it has been such an amazing expansion on my own time whenever I choose, in the middle of the night if I wanted to, or from whatever location as long as I have internet, to learn about so many aspects of work and social responsibility. Because the Pachamama Alliance brings together those three pieces that for me were important. They say they work towards a environmentally sustainable, a socially responsible, and a spiritually fulfilling world for humans on this planet. So it all comes together, and the technology in particular has allowed me to go down so many fascinating rabbit holes that and end up learning about people like Buckminster Fuller, who has some very inspirational things to say around if you lived, I can't quote him exactly, but if you knew that the way you live your life in this world would make a difference to humanity and how it progresses, how would you live your life? And it's he's someone I did not pay attention to for anything like that in his days. For some of the other pieces in terms of change, the the Women's Shelter and First United have been more, I would say, difficult to make the contact, partly because both of those organizations are always in transition themselves. And First United, I think we're at a stage of change there, and we're not sure what role we play. And so it's been harder to have those conversations. And they're also very focused on just keeping people alive and healthy. So they haven't really got time to be in discussion. The refugee work has been quite, I think, difficult. I would use the word only because, you know, our most recent refugees were barely here. They came the end of January. So their ability to understand what life was like in Canada, and for us to build some relationship with them, was absolutely kind of cut off. Yes, we were getting them, and even their language lessons got transferred to being online. But for one of them, it didn't work. The one who had more English was able to kind of transfer and basically is, you might say, totally functional, learning English or improving English, and also taking a university course out of the States, which was happening before, you know, they arrived. But for someone who comes in, doesn't have the language, and is totally alone other than their partner, doesn't know anybody else here, and it seems to have really compounded the difficulty of arriving. And we, as much as we can try and go and sit and have coffee at a distance in someone's backyard, it's pretty hard when you don't share a language.
Yeah, it's when nonverbal communication really.
That's right.
Play a role.
And so how do you learn to trust?
Mm.
You know, and how do you know, how can we help people in that situation to relax and allow us to try to, you know, hold their hand, and which is one thing we just can't do. So how it just takes time and to build that kind of trust, and that seems to be a particular difficulty in the current situation. And other than that, the refugee work has, of course, all kind of movement out of countries has been totally stopped. So that will all be backlogged in a system that we already knew was really suffering from long delays. So that one's been hard. The Truth and Reconciliation one is, again, I was just thinking about how powerful some of the events that we coordinated, or mostly Maggie Hosgood coordinated, where something like the blanket exercise. Well, that would be something that we couldn't do in these times. That doesn't say we can't be planning, and it doesn't say that it isn't an excellent time for that self-evaluation, that self-change, that questioning that we all need to do on that whole topic. And I'm really struck right now by the current energy around the anti-racist and the Black Lives Matters movement, that for us in Canada, the kind of equivalent or the really powerful piece is around our response to our Indigenous population, and how, especially if we're white with European stock, there's a lot of reflection that has to happen. So whether people take this opportunity to use it or not, it certainly comes at me rather dramatically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I noticed in this month of June, where there is June 21st, Aboriginal Day, that there's a number of online opportunities to engage. The United Church is having something every Sunday afternoon, and I know many groups are putting out, I think it was called a virtual powwow even online. So there are ways to engage with the issue, and like you say, do some self-reflection.
Yeah, and I think that that's the piece that I always am questioning is how do we move our thinking into action?
Mm.
And so this is a great opportunity to do, that self work. But as you know, we look at the climate change work, things that actually need us not, I think as one person put it, not to be sitting in the stands. We need to be, playing, we need to be in the game. And obviously with the Truth and Reconciliation, you can see in the Indigenous work, we do need to be in the game now. We've had a lot of time, and people, I heard one person say, "What do you mean you don't know what to do or you don't know how to help? How come? Why haven't you been paying attention? How come you don't know?" And it's sort of like they now talk about it's not good enough to raise your children as not seeing color, being colorblind. No, you need to talk about color, and you need to you need to be part of the answer, not just waiting for something to happen. So it all as usual, social responsibility gets all mixed in together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Things are connected to one another. So in this time of functioning virtually, have there been some new learnings for you? Some ways of doing things that you hadn't expected beforehand?
There's more been, I suppose, some emphasis on kind of what is important. I would use the, and I may not have mentioned this before, just the work with through Cafe Justicia and bringing coffee in from Guatemala. There was recently, because of the pandemic, I don't know if people have been reading about it, but certainly in Guatemala is hit very hard for a whole bunch of different reasons, not the least of which is a lot of our migrant workers come from Guatemala, and they certainly got caught in both ends of whether they could travel in or out of their country or in or out of Canada. But about 10 days ago, there was a webinar for the people, well, anybody who wanted, but I obviously heard about it through Cafe Justicia and BC Casa, who brings in the coffee. And it was with the head of the CCDA, which is the organizer for the coffee growers in Guatemala. And he asked for the webinar, and on this end, on the Canadian end, there was people from the Maritimes all the way through to here in BC who were on. They managed to have it was a Zoom call, but there was a translator because he obviously spoke in Spanish, and he had one of the other members of his group, a woman who's in a large leadership role. And I was just thinking about how the people involved, how at this time that we still have a way to get together, and for him to be able to reach out and say, it is so important that you are still there for us. We know we can't go back and forth, but when you speak out about things that we talk about here that, are going very wrong for us, it works. It is important to us. And the fact that you walk with us, it keeps us going. And I was thinking, it works because, the webinar, even though there's a distance there, if you didn't know anybody, of course, you would kind of wonder. But I personally have met him, and I saw him when he, again, with another combination here, was when I went with the Healing Hands group to Guatemala with Sharon Yetman from the North Shore. We happened to go and see him in Congress. So he, for one period, he was actually got elected into the Congress. So I've met him when I was grinding coffee some years ago, and he would come up. But of course, I don't speak Spanish, and he doesn't speak English. So, but it's a piece that, you already have the connection. You're not having to make it through the Zoom call. But it's so important in terms of staying connected and just being able to continue to see where you go with what action or work you need to do. So that it wasn't something new, but it was kind of different emphasis for me. The ahas were just, as I said, being in an online program that I chose to be in was called the Game Changer Intensive. So it's called, okay, so you're concerned about climate change. Let's look at how you move forward. And a lot of it had to do with, your self-development and reflection and things that you needed to commit to and ideas for going forward. The information and the education was so expansive. People I'd never heard of, that when I went and looked at the things they'd written or they'd said, just knocked my socks off. It was amazing. And it would cross-reference. So many people will know I'm not well read. I have not in my lifetime taken time to read. But I know that people would come up, and I would have heard somebody from, say, the contemplative prayer people talk about this person, or I would have heard somebody else, from a totally different kind of area. As I said, that's where Buckminster Fuller came up. Like, wow. So it was very exciting. And that organization has been, Pachamama Alliance has been a real inspiration, because they continue all through this pandemic. They have been putting out weekly, they put webinars together, and sometimes 300 people are online from all over the world. And they have, they've got different members of their board of directors. And they're all, when you look at them, they're all very interesting people from different parts. One of them is a Black minister that comes on and speaks once in a while. And, fortunately, they record them, because you can go back and re-listen, because you're going, wow, that was a lot of sort of new ideas or new ways of looking at things. So that's been my excitement of the internet. And yeah, I started that course before the pandemic hit us. In fact, I was finished the course before it did, but I put a couple of other people, I convinced a couple other people to get on it during the pandemic, because it runs every, 10 weeks maybe. And I know a couple of people were absolutely thrilled to have that piece as their, kind of keep them going.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for all those ideas and sharing what this time has meant for your engagement with social justice. I'm wondering if you would be willing, maybe we can put out your email or something if people are interested in following up on some of these things they've heard about. Maybe engaging with the drawdown program around climate change, or getting more involved with the fair trade coffee or anything like that? Would you be willing?
Yes, that is fine. I'm always excited to find that, because you often put things out and nothing comes back. So I don't know whether people have email overload or, so I'm more than willing to accept. And the coffee sales continue.
Okay. Let's do a little commercial here at the
Yes.
end. Well, thank you for continuing in
Okay.
all the good works that you do in seeking justice in this world, seeking health for this world. And thank you also for being willing to chat with me today.
Okay. You're welcome.